Okay, so we're going to start a panel Q&A. A good friend, Ray Terrera, is here. Ray has been pretty instrumental in building our post-production facility at Google Developer Studio. Came in as a freelancer just a couple of years ago, and now pretty much runs the place. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes.
And thank you to our panel for coming to talk with us. We have a pretty diverse group of people here coming from different backgrounds and different areas of the media. So really interested to hear your thoughts on some of the different questions we have. And throughout the presentation and the talk, if any of you are inspired to ask a question, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. And I don't want to save Q&A for the end because I know we're kind of running a little bit late. So I want to make sure you guys get your questions in before the night's done. So we already know Dave. Already know me. So we'll skip the introduction on Dave. But if we can start here and maybe just go down the line and just introduce yourself, your background, and what your company does.
I'm Sean Lee. I'm product evangelist at OpenDrives. OpenDrives is an ultra-high performance network-attached storage device strictly designed for media entertainment purposes only. Personally, I have over 25 years in post-production IT infrastructures and workflows. So if you have any questions regarding storage workflow, we work with Adobe very tightly, as well as all the other software products, After Effects, Blackmagic, the Foundry, you name it, we do it.
My name is Casey Krugman. I'm the brand and product manager of Luxli. We are a lighting company. We focus on RGB AW lighting, which will give you full color and accurate white. And yeah, we make all the stuff that goes into post look good.
All right, my name is Erling Hedkvist. I'm a product manager at Lawo. And Lawo is a German company that manufactures equipment for video and audio broadcasters, such as ABC, CBS, Fox, any of those big guys, for core infrastructure, video and audio processing, and transport.
My name is Kari Eythorsson. I'm a product manager for a company called ClearCom. ClearCom is originally a San Francisco-based company. It was started in the summer of love. As kind of around the emergence of popular music, which was a big scene here in the Bay Area, firmly rooted in live performance, be that theater, shows of all sorts of sizes, and in later years has then morphed with developing technologies and needs to anything from very simple systems for video production or say small theaters, up to systems that span the globe for, say, military applications, big television networks, and so on.
Hi, I'm Michael Harabin, and I'm the president of GearHouse Broadcast in the U.S. GearHouse, we got our start renting gear, thus the name. Now we branched down into mobile units, mobile production units, and managed services that we provide to everybody from Facebook to Red Bull. We do a lot of action sports, tennis. We're big in the tennis world too, USTA and the ATP. And that's our background, is mostly in live sports and live event productions.
Great, thank you. And I know the theme of tonight is the future, but I want to talk about the present. And I'm sorry, Brian, to skip out from the theme, but can we talk about maybe what are some of the more interesting technological trends you guys have seen in the media for this year in 2019? Anybody?
So for us, it's all about interfacing to new things to interface to. There's a lot of development happening right now, for example, in networking, in all of our different spaces. We deal with, as I mentioned, everything from very simple systems. So in the video world, we have things like NDI, on the kind of entry level of the market. And in the bigger plants, we have things like SMPTE 2110. For us, it's very important to be able to interface to all of that and to be able to do that seamlessly. We as an industry, we are somewhere on the path of being able to do that collectively between us. Mm-hmm. And so things are moving positively in that direction right now. We see a lot of new installs and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing, I think, right now, at least for my company.
Right.
So for us in our space, there are two occurrences happening. For the larger events, the well-known stuff that most people are familiar with, Super Bowl, World Series, those productions are stagnant. There's only so many of those to go around. But the events that happen around those are what's being produced more. So it's the halftime, the post-game, the influencers who are there at the event, the athletes themselves, the participants. That's generating more content that is more popular than the actual event itself. So that's the first occurrence. The second occurrence is that with the advent of different technology and production techniques, there are actually more events being produced. Now, you might not be interested in dog herding or classic car racing, whatever it is, but those events are being produced because the price point has gotten so low that the Dog Herding Association or whatever it is can now produce and stream their events. So the growth seems to be with smaller, more individualized, smaller audiences, but because the price point, thanks to technology, has come down, you can now do more of that. And that's really where we see the present and also the future coming out.
Yeah, and just to add quickly to that, the ease of use of products. So being able to build products, so let's say in the past, we used to build these big elaborate systems that were inherently very complex and they needed the equivalent of a rocket scientist to drive them. Today, being able to take the right subset of functionality and give it in an easy to use package, that is something that we see a lot of growth in to be able to accommodate these kind of productions.
Okay, so from my perspective and from Lawo's perspective, what we've been doing a lot in the last, I would say, 3-4 years is the move to IP. Everything is moved over to SIMD 2110 and A67, all these standards that came out of the woodworks, and we moved our platform completely over to that. But the move to IP is not for the sake of moving to a new transport medium. It's really to enable new workflows. And as part of that is something that really many other industries has already been through. The banking industries in the 80s and the telco industries in the 90s. The move to IP enables new workflows and enables new technologies to come around. And for us, one of the important ones there has been the software-defined functionality, right? So it used to be that the equipment we used to sell, you bought product X and it would do X forever. And it would do a really good job doing X forever, but that's not the requirement customers have anymore. They say, well, I can't afford to buy a product that just does this one thing. It needs to be able to do the small game, and I need to break this, and then I can put 5 things together, make a big game, and whatever it might be. And this has been a major shift for us. So it's the move to IP, the move to software-defined, virtualized environments that enables new workflows across boundaries. I think the Google guys are saying they do production in San Francisco, LA, everything at the same time, and that's kind of, we see a lot of that. And having the connectivity and having technology that enables those type of workflows is what we spent a lot of time doing.
Building off of that, in lighting technology, there's been a lot of advances in terms of the actual LEDs being used and the type of lights that are available. But also it has been simplifying, and it has been, scaling down and making things so that you don't have to be an engineer, especially a lighting engineer, to actually be able to use these lights effectively. So the idea is from any type of shooter, from the largest of studios and installation systems to the individual content creator that's going out there with their, let's say, Android phone, given the location, but, going out into the field and doing these things on the fly, they don't have that background. And so now we, as a company, have been trying to unify the UI in a visual language that is familiar to shooters of all skill sets and experience levels. And the technology and being able to, what we do in terms of tech is we actually do the color mixing on each individual LED, which allows us to have a much thinner profile, which makes it lightweight, more portable. So as that technology has come out and as connectivity has become more of a requirement and less of a bonus feature, that's also opening up a lot of different avenues on how these lights are going to work from the largest to the smallest scales.
I completely agree with everything that these very intelligent people said in terms of the move to IP on the broadcast side. The ease of use has become definitely, top of mind for people. We get so used to using our phones and the technology is so accessible that people want that same kind of ease of use. And being a enterprise storage manufacturer, we have customers like CNN that have an entire engineering broadcast, team that focuses on storage and that architecture. But our same product that services that large scale must also service the Cohen brothers, for example, which are a few guys in New York City loft, and they don't have a lot of engineering or IT experience, but still need the performance. They don't have any. But still need to be able to use high performant network attached storage in order to get their projects done. Another thing I wanted to touch on the broadcast piece is, in the past, broadcast is done. We're done with it. We don't care about it anymore. It's off to post, and that may happen days later. But I love what you said about, there's all these other delivery platforms now, whether it be Facebook or YouTube or other platforms, where it needs to go from your live broadcast directly to a post team. And that post team needs to churn out that content immediately, whether it's for a halftime show or for other consumable streams that people want to see these things. So that bridge between live broadcast to post becomes much closer. And I think that the companies are also looking at their return on investment. We have this live broadcast environment. How do we remonetize this over and over again, using that same content piece and repurposing it again over and over?
I'll add 2 points of color to that. I got the mic. One is we do support NDI. Speaking about the IP stuff you guys are talking about. So if you didn't know that, there's full support for that. It's free, by the way. So it's a free plugin for Mac or Windows you can add. So that's cool. A lot of people starting to play around with NDI support. Secondly, the biggest thing I think I'm asked for that kind of fits into the conversation here, and really hitting on what you just said, is repurposing content. So you've done a live show, you've got a recording. Now we need to get it out to Instagram video, square, or IGTV, which is 9:16, 16:9. The editor or in the production says, you guys go do that. You're like, I have absolutely no time for this. I got to get on to these other creative things. So we're working on tools. You can look at something on YouTube called Smooth Operator. It's amazing that auto tracks the subject and auto cuts for you. And then when you go back into Premiere, you can make whatever modifications you need to make, but it's using AI to auto cut for 16:9, 9:16, or square, auto scale, do whatever it needs to do so you don't have to do it. So
I think all the editors in the room would agree. That's very scary technology coming out. So I think
there's also one kind of neat thing also in Adobe Premiere with live growing files off of systems like EVS, where you can do a broadcast record. And as that file's recording within Premiere, you can edit that content as it's writing, which is really neat. So your turnaround time, you don't have to finish at the end of the show and then deliver it and then edit it. You can actually edit it while it's being recorded.
And you have to watch your storage when you pick storage for what systems can support growing files, because that's very specific to shared storage.
You all talked a lot about the ease of use of technology and the dropping price points. I think that a lot of your companies have traditionally targeted like broadcast media and higher end companies. Has the change in technology and the price point, the lower price point, changed the way you think about the way you market and design your products? Are you looking at more of a consumer, prosumer base, or are you still targeting the high-end broadcast end, or is it kind of not that clear of a cut delineation between the two anymore?
So I'll take a stab at that first. So I love what you said about this modular aspect of how the technology needs to function. It needs to both function on the small end, and then the large end, it needs to be able to, like, I need to take this big thing and break it down into the small thing and use it for the small thing, and vice versa. OpenDrives is taking a very serious look at this to say, hey, we want to make sure that we have one product to service everybody. We don't want to make the choices too difficult. So we are moving to a modular platform where you can buy and enter at a smaller price point, and then you can grow that to enterprise scale. So it's affecting us directly.
Do you see yourself, like, when you say modular, like how small are we talking? Like, would someone buy this? Like, would a single video maker, like someone who's going out and doing like their own freelance work, would they buy like a starting point for that? And as they grow their company, can they add on to it and expand? Or is it more, you're looking at a team of 10, 15 people?
I think we do have a lot of producers that are husband and wife team.
Yeah.
Just two people on a team, each have a different purpose, but they're all hitting the same storage. I think that's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started as the big enterprise appliance. And so we're working down from there. So the next revision will be, I would say, small to mid-sized team size. And we also are working on a product that's more of a, almost like a DIT could, enter that space and utilize one of our products.
I do say I support the Cohen brothers, and there's just, you probably know, there's only two of them. So they're hitting their storage. So
cool.
They're not hitting the same storage that you would hit at CNN.
I mean, the funny thing when it comes to me being on this panel is, first of all, we're in lighting and everyone else here is, let's be honest, way, way higher. You know, we're actually going in the opposite direction. We started more for the consumer. The first light that we created was called the Viola. It was a little 5-inch on-camera panel. We spent 2 years developing it and developing the base technology for it. And as soon as we came out with this light, you know, people were saying, oh, that's great. So how much bigger can it get? And then it was, oh, okay, well then we can scale up from there. So we're actually sort of tapping from underneath on the enterprise market. And as we're growing literally with the lights and as we're growing more into the market, we're starting to add more and more features, but it's all based on this sort of core technology. So it's been an interesting journey, sort of meeting everybody over the past couple of days and meeting some of you at NAB and really hearing what you guys are missing in terms of what's available on the market and what you need from us. And because of where we started, we now can expand and sort of, you know, we can tree out into a lot of different things. So yeah, I'm interested to see how you guys are sort of affected by this because, as I said, I'm coming at it from the opposite end.
From Lawo perspective, we have quite a wide product portfolio, so we have even stuff you can download for free, etc. But most, to be honest, on my end as well, 90% of our business is in big companies. But what is changing though is how these big companies want to pay for it. CapEx is going down, OpEx is going up. So for us, this is okay because we can support them with new technology, right? So we're moving into models pretty much, honestly, as quickly as the customer wants to move into it. We're ready to do it right now, but not all customers are ready to move into it, where they pay as they go. It's a subscription-based model, and primarily guys like GearHouse and stuff are interested in this kind of stuff because they do shows, then they do nothing or do a different show. And if they have generic hardware that can be loaded with application-specific software that will do whatever they need to do for that ATP tournament, and then it does something different, that is quite useful for that. So that's kind of the direction we're seeing in regards to that question.
Yeah, so I would say for my company, we started making really simple, really inexpensive systems. Say 25 years into the history of the company, we started building something on the other end of the spectrum. Both of those kind of product families and their positioning are relatively the same as they were before. But what we've done a lot of development is that in that wedge in between, which is kind of what I mentioned before, is giving people the capabilities that go in there. But there is something to be said about the fact that regardless of which one of whatever your budget is it $1,200 or is it $1.2 million? In the end of the day, for my product, which is a communications product, it is there to serve a certain purpose for the user that's doing something else. You know, 99.5% of the users of my product, their primary focus is not on my product. It's a utility to help them do their job. And so regardless of that price point and that, you know, let's say capability that the system may have to support, the user experience needs to be somewhat familiar to them, because you may one day be doing a relatively small shoot. The next one you may be doing a Facebook F8 event or something of that nature, which is on a far greater scale than, you know, whatever you do in your 500-seat theater when you're doing, say, an all-hands meeting or whatever that may be. So I think what was mentioned about virtualization, for example, being able to build this elasticness into our systems to help them scale from these really small systems for just a handful of users, and then relatively effortlessly up to hundreds or thousands or whatever that may be. Our challenge as manufacturers historically has been the price of the hardware. You know, there is a fixed cost to supporting those things. With virtualization and being able to put things onto servers and so on, yeah, you can talk to Google or Amazon and put it on a farm somewhere, and then, you know, as you need support into the future, you just grow from that.
A lot of the production values that we deploy on an event are usually geared around the customer's desire to monetize the event itself. So whether it's a comm system so we could coordinate commercial breaks with master control, or a graphic system to put full page billboards up or lower thirds, or picture in picture so they could run an ad while the event's going on. Those types of values are added by the customer dictated by their desire to monetize the event as much as they can. That's really what drives what we deliver to the event.
And we talked a little bit about AI. We mentioned AI
Yeah.
and some of the stuff that it's doing to help us as media professionals. And I made the joke about it stealing jobs, but really, I think that AI is going to do wonders in helping automate and get rid of the stuff that we as creatives don't want to do. I'm curious to hear some of your inputs on the ways AI is shaping your industries and some of the ways that it's going to benefit us in the future.
I'll just start because people will look at us and go, hey, what's going on with these jobs? So we try to take the mundane out. Like, should we actually have you working in After Effects if that's not what you do? Let's figure out what the tools are. We showed you that. We should also do things like, we have another thing you can look up on YouTube is Project Fast Mask at Adobe Max last year. And it is a real-time tracker for After Effects. And all I have to do is just put like 4 clicks on him. We know that that's a person. I know what the characteristics are. And it takes 1 pass at the video, and then it just automatically creates an outline so I can turn them black and white or do whatever it is that I need to do. So that's, nobody wants to have to go in and figure out how to mask out a person. There's even a demo of a kitten, and the kitten's got lots of hair. You can't have too many cats on the web. So you can actually, but we know the characteristics of a cat, so we know how to set. So it's all intelligent. Nobody wants to do that. However, we don't want you to do it so automatic that when it's wrong, I can't go in and just with a few adjustments fix it. So we're like, let us assist you as much as we can so you get back to creating, as corny as it sounds. Let's get you back to creating and not going in and doing all this kind of work. So that's where we see AI really helping out a lot. So.
Yeah, from OpenDrives perspective, it's in the same way, it's removing those mundane processes. How many people in the room manage storage or have problems with storage? Show of hands. Yeah. And so what is the major problems that we face with that? Performance and need more. Always out of space. So how do you decide, what gets moved, right? Especially in the video production space, like what's going to archive, what's going to cloud. If it's in the cloud, is it fast enough for me to be able to access it and do it when I need it? If we could remove some of that and build in some intelligence to the storage to say, oh, we can intelligently place the data where it is that you need it when you need it the most. This is what we're focused on. This is what we're looking at using AI to do so that it's not inhibiting the creative process to make sure that the files are exactly where you need at the performance tier that you need and saving your company time and money.
I would also add to that, because you gave a good point, which is we also want storage to understand that, this is my wish and I hear it every day as well, metadata is very important. So when I know what's in a file, storage needs to know there's a sidecar file with that or whatever it is, so we can always get back when we're doing searches there to sort of say, we understand that there's trees here, cars here, whatever
Absolutely.
it is, that these are the clips that will actually help me with that metadata. Because once you scrape the metadata, you get it where it wants it. It's great when shared storage understands that there's these types of files.
Absolutely.
That we need speedy access to.
Metadata is everything.
We tend to look at our jobs as projects, and every project there's the pre-production, production, and post-production phases. Production, there's just too much manipulation of the video. The processes can't be virtualized. There's not a lot of artificial intelligence goes into it. You go to the NAV and EVS invites you into the back room. You could see their soccer game switched by AI rather than a human being. And it's not bad. It's pretty close. There are a few times you could see where it's not the person and it's the machine, but it's pretty close. Soccer's an easy sport. There's not a lot of action going on. It's a 180 sport. It's not baseball. But most of the AI that we deal with ends up in pre-production or post. And post, it's how could you curate a highlight and get it published as quickly as possible? How do you capture the metadata from the camera, so it knows its location, the time of day. You could then correlate that to the game, the event, and all these other things. So we try to capture that as much as you can on the post side. And by post, it's not craft post editing. This is really just cut heads and tails and get it out as quickly as you can. The machines are getting pretty good at that. They could monitor audio. They know when there's a rise in audio. They could do OCR. They see when the scoreboard changes. They know when the highlights occurred. The
Auto
machine
highlights
knows.
too by
Yeah.
AI, which could be
Sure.
huge for the industry.
And you can monetize that really
Sure.
quickly. If you could do it quickly, you post it. It does drive viewership. It does drive hits on a web when you could get that turned around, especially from multiple camera angles, as quickly as you possibly can. So on the post side for us, that's where AI is really having the biggest impact. Of course, it's circular. So if you do post well, the search and discovery phase when you want to create an event is very easy if the post is done well.
Yeah.
It's just the production center that really doesn't get a lot of love right now from AI. Maybe it will in the next couple of years, but for right now, it's the pre and post that we focus on AI deployment.
Yeah, you mentioned something about the metadata again and the information that's there. We don't have a MAM representation here in this panel, but being a storage company, we work with a lot of MAM manufacturers, and what we see a lot of MAMs moving to cloud-based to leverage compute to do image recognition and sound processing and that kind of stuff.
Speech to text.
Yeah,
is huge.
speech to text, and how then you gather more metadata information and applying it to those files. So, back in the day, I'm sure people are still doing it now, where you just have annotators that are sitting around just in a room, like typing out the metadata for these things, and utilizing AI for those things is another big move that we see.
Yeah, we use a MAM that actually auto tags through
Yeah.
machine learning.
Yep.
But like to that point though, it's like I still see it not as being a replacement for someone who's going to tag that media. Like I think that's still a really long ways away. It's efficiency and it augments the process.
If we
I
can get
think.
you, 50% of the way there, then
Exactly.
that is
It
more,
saves
more
us
work.
time, but it's
Yeah.
also like getting rid of. It's adding value to our system, but
Yeah.
it's like saving us a ton of time by not doing the things and adding extra tags on top of the tags we've already.
And it's also
Right.
gotten pretty cheap. So we have a plugin from Digital Anarchy called Transcriptive, which is a speech engine called Speechmatics. I use it all the time. 1 hour video takes 8 minutes to process before you have the closed caption, open caption, plain script, markers, whatever you want back to the timeline.
And that plugs
in
right in.
178 languages.
That's a plugin for Premiere
It's a
now,
plugin
right?
for Premiere. It's $2.99, and it uses IBM Watson, Speechmatics, and there's 3 other ones. 3 cents a minute is for Watson, 6 cents a minute. So less than you would pay your Starbucks, tip your Starbucks barista. You could have your hour content done at 6 cents a minute. Transcriptive. And then the speech engine you want is Speechmatics. And if anybody wants to see it, I'll stick around afterwards and show it to you. It's incredible. But that's a perfect example of AI, because I think that would help your example. Anybody's, where you just need to take this content and get it out in a bunch of languages. And by the way, they're a European country, so they understand a lot of those sort of thicker English dialects. They have a lot of the good Indian languages. They've got a lot of the Asian language. It's amazing what these guys can do, but all on AI, and they get smarter all the time. So.
Yeah, I also think that a lot of people look at these things, whether it's cloud or on-prem or AI or not AI, as being these all or nothing kinds of things. And I think that it's all hybridized, meaning you probably need some of it. Is it going to do everything you need? Probably not. Like, you're probably still going to need a body and a seat to maybe QC that or do some different things. So looking at these solutions being not always a replacement, like I'm going to do that or I'm going to do this, but maybe more of a holistic view of doing some of this and some of that together to improve the efficiency of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you see the shift away, maybe not the full shift away, but an emphasis on online video and streaming platforms? Do you see that changing the way that your customers are coming to you or asking for products, and what are those changes and how are they?
Like a virtual machine, VDI, VM?
No, not necessarily virtual machine, but more online video as a platform and hosting clips online and streaming to streaming services such as YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, I would say that's the norm right now.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much any video that's created has got to get to those platforms.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that probably the most impact that we see is how many different versions of your thing do you need to create, whether it's resolution or file type or language, a lot, as we get to these different platforms.
Yeah,
Probably
the
great
other thing
feedback.
is they're always changing, right? Like, my kids are big into social, like probably a lot of the kids that any of the young 20-somethings or teenagers, they're born into this, and, snap face or whatever the next thing is going to be, you have to then say, oh, well, this needs to be a custom size window. We'll probably get to, circular video before you know it and have to figure that out. But whatever it is, we're going to have to deal with it.
I know one of the
Sure.
things I struggle a lot with is keeping current in the industry, especially since there's so many changes coming, so many new technology and buzzwords and things being thrown out. What are some of the ways that each of you stay current and know what your customers need in the future?
So we, just like Adobe, are 100% customer-driven feature set. We don't sit around and decide what we think is cool and then build that thing. It's really driven from our customers and requests, just like you guys have. In fact, I think I'm going to take that idea back and add that to our website.
I'll add, we should probably give these guys a chance, but it's talking to guys like this and work together as an industry to sort of say, these are the things that we think are important. And you probably wouldn't be surprised that there's a lot of alignment in what you're trying to get done and what we're trying to get done for their benefit. So having the industry talk to each other, vendor to vendor, is critical.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's one of the reasons, I personally love going to shows like NAB New York, or even coming here and doing everything, is getting a chance to really just meet everybody and see what everybody else is coming up with. Because, you get into these things where you're in your company and you're looking at it and you're working it and you're building the next thing that you're building, or you're refining what you've been working on, or all of the technology, and you're very, very focused on absolute detail. And then you can take a step back, take a breather, and then look at what everybody else is doing. And as soon as you see someone else doing something, you're like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing there, and this is how I would go about it. And it just gives you another spin on it. So it is really important to just poke your head up every once in a while and really sit and discuss. And even completely unrelated technologies, because one will feed off of the other in just hey, that's a really cool way of doing that, maybe in just an engineering sense, or just a physical sense, or even just a style of shooting in a way that you're using the product or other products in order to get more into your workflow. So keeping up and paying attention is really, really one of the most important things you can be doing these days.
Well, customers will always tell you what they want, right? So that's a good way of being, in businesses. The only way to be in business is to do businesses. They say, you think you know what you want to do, you go out there, you talk to someone, and say, no, actually, this is how we do it, and you talk to customers, and that's a good thing. But we also sit back and we're fortunate enough to do some core research. So if I just were to listen to what customers want, I would never make that big leap. So we have done some cool technologies where we actually have sat back and we looked at some core research we've done. You can look at some research papers that were done 20, 30 years ago, and technologies that are in there that no one has thought about using for our little industry. And can we use this? Is this a cool thing? Would this work for us? And we work with it, we play with it, and we show customers, and it just, wow, this is actually really cool. So that's the really cool stuff, when we actually can come up with something that is, leapfrogging the competition a little bit, and not just looking at what everybody else is doing. Now, those are few and far between. Most of the time, it's just, can you make this gray, or can you make this go up to 11? But sometimes we have these breakthroughs, so we do some core research as well.
Yeah, so my thing is almost the same. So my company historically operates on a very consultative-based. We work closely with our customers. So we have a lot of interaction with them, a lot of relationships that may go back decades and whatnot. My favorite thing personally is to just sit and observe people, observe them work with your product. And suddenly you start to see a totally different aspect of it. And then they will give you lists and lists of things that they want, right? But there is the thing that sometimes You need to do those things. You need to address them because normally they are some sort of a hurt for somebody. They're hurting for something. So it's something that makes their life easier. And normally it's relatively small things, but it's a collection of them. But you need to step back from that, look at the big picture, look what is around you, but still remain true to yourself. You know, what are you about? Where do you want to take your customers? So I don't think anything beats being curious, just in general. You know, just look at what's around you. I thought the Adobe thing is fascinating. I haven't used Photoshop for 15 years, you know, let alone any of these other amazing tools. But to me, it's really cool to look at these things. And sometimes something that is as far away from your product as looking at something like that can spark an idea. So just keep an open mind and be curious, you know.
It's an interesting question because you could be overwhelmed with the amount of information you could obtain on the web or in publications. But I think networking with smart people is probably the most effective way of getting it. And especially if you could get outside of your bubble and get outside of media. My best lesson in doing this was we were having problems installing a network with latency and security and all these other things. And we stumbled upon a young person who came from the financial services industry. Well, if you want to learn about latency and security, talk to a guy who works in the financial services business. They have everything over people trying to move video files from one place to another. And it was just eye-opening to get a perspective from somebody who it really matters about what latency is and how you get in front of people by milliseconds and make millions. So it was important to get outside your bubble once in a while and get a different perspective on things, so, at least for us.
Great. Erling, you mentioned a little bit about how your company is really involved with integrating AV signals over IP. That's something I just recently learned about. So I would be interested in maybe giving a little overview of what that is to the group and also why it's a benefit to use IP to transport AV signals.
Oh yeah, sure. I forgot about the microphone. So this is not just my company. This is in general the kind of the trend of half of NAB, whatever. If you go there now, so traditionally the broadcast industry has been it's the last holdout that we're using legacy technology, SDI, ASI, all sorts of serial digital interface, NTSC, you name it, go back. It is, I mean, and now that we're moving into HDR, and I just need to mention this, it's fascinating. When we're moving into HDR now, which is high dynamic range, it's not quite the same thing as on your phone, whatever. But the reasons that we have the standards, what you watch on TV when you go home tonight and watch the news, the reason the picture is the brightness it is because of the luminance
of the old technology
from a 1928 television set. That is the reason that the luminance is what it is today. And this has followed, so you can go backwards in standard from now to 1928 and it's backwards compatible, which is a feat. It's definitely a feat. And finally we're saying maybe we should move to something different. So that's what IP is about, is finally making that change. What, as I mentioned earlier, the banking industry did in the 80s when they had proprietary systems to make sure that your money moved from New York to Los Angeles and was secure and safe and all this stuff. And now this stuff is basically done over the internet, right? You certainly do all your banking on the internet. I do my banking on the internet, and we don't think twice about it, right? Telephone industry did the same thing. They had, PBX switches. They were doing, long distance. I remember my dad was telling me when he was a kid and they get a long distance call, hurry up, because it was expensive. Grandma wants to say hi on Christmas. Jesus, hurry up. Okay, hi, Mom. Bye, because it's 2 minutes. That's all we can afford, right? So that is all changing now. So back to your question after all that exposition. So we finally now moved to a point where the bandwidths are there, the latency is there, the switching capacity is there, so we can move basically live production video over IP switches. So the standard that came out it was in record speed for SMPTE, called SMPTE 2110, standardizes how professional video, live broadcast video, so that's HD, SD, HD, UHD is all done over IP networks, as well as the audio side synchronization using a precision timing protocol is all done over IP, and that has been a major change for our company, and I think for a lot of other broadcast manufacturers as well. So we're just at the beginning phase of this. So we'll see what happens in the next few years and how this is going to change our industry. It's quite cool stuff.
Are there any predictions in how you'll see this change, like in how this will filter down to maybe like the consumer, prosumer video creator?
I don't know. It's a
don't know.
great question.
In our world, you'll see more productions switched, mixed, replays, and graphics done from a home base rather than in the field. You don't have to drive a truck full of equipment out to a remote site. All you need is the cameras, hopefully someday with an encoder chip in it and a Cat5 cable at a game in, I don't know, Portland, and your studio's in LA. You could just send those camera leads back to LA and do all your production there.
But just look at what they're doing with Twitch.
Yeah.
Even my son, he does Twitch. He's got a little Elgato box. He's got like 3 cameras connected. He can click this button, that button, and you can see his screen. You can see his face down here. You can throw up text.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but it is a virtual switching system that goes live out to an audience of 3 or whoever it is, an audience of
If you want to see
10.
something wild, watch a Riot Games tournament
Sure,
produced
absolutely.
in Seoul, Korea. They're probably dragging back, I don't know, 25 or 30 cameras from a stadium in Seoul and doing the production out of Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles and sending it out to the world. And I don't know how many different renditions that are, who's watching this thing, but it's all being produced in Los Angeles. The only thing that's out in Seoul are a couple of techs and P2Z cameras, and maybe a few human beings running jibs or aerial cams.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, what we're seeing a little bit different of a move is
Live broadcast video in sports has always been maybe like the industry leading standard for how it is that we're looking at live sports capture and how that's being done. And your question being like, how is this going to trickle down into maybe consumer-based stuff? I actually think maybe it's coming from the other side, meaning, your reference to Twitch and video gaming and how esports is actually coming up on that IP-based technology much faster because they are limited by the physical aspects of a camera and capturing some video, like over an SDI feed or baseband. So I think that it's actually coming from the other side. And a lot of companies are looking at esports and referencing what guys are doing in esports and then taking the IP based technologies that are coming up in broadcast and kind of bridging those two together. Is I think what we're seeing.
And by the way, speaking of esports, because I was at Blizzard Arena the other day, another one on your list, by the way, there are high schools that will be starting up esports leagues. How are those high schools? They're already happening. Full Sail's already down in Florida. Is already installing one. That's right.
Yep.
Scholarships. So how are they going to get this technology broadcasted? It's going to be some sort of IP broadcast as well as just virtual, like these Elgato switchers and things like that. So.
Do we think maybe the prevalence of things like 5G in the future? Are we going to be able to send
Absolutely.
video signals over that network speed?
No question. We might all get brain cancer, but it's going to be,
Thank you all.
as long as it's over fast. I don't know, because that scares me, but some of the demos I've seen in 5G are pretty amazing.
Yeah,
So
we might be able to broadcast video signals straight from the camera.
I think from your camera to the cloud and
Right.
even a couple of 5G packs, because we're working with Sony and some other customers now that have these packs with like Hearst television and stuff, and these guys just shoot directly on their XAVC, go right to the cloud and down to their editors. It's amazing, and they're editing it right in the NLE. So it's crazy.
This is one thing I want to touch on a little bit, just as we talk about esports. Many of you in the room probably are in that kind of traditional theatrical, video space, short form, long form, and so resolution has always been a big talking point. UHD, 4K, 8K. Now, when we talk about esports and broadcast, you really need to be looking at the frame rates. So everything is going to be 60 FPS and higher. And that is doubling your data rate. So keep your eye on that. Don't only look at resolution, look at frame rates and see what that's doing to your network and your bandwidth.
We mentioned the Blizzard conference, I think, just recently.
Yeah.
I know you were
Esports,
very
yeah.
involved with setting up a pretty amazing setup at BlizzCon in 2018. Could you maybe talk about that setup and what you guys did there?
Yeah, so OpenDrives worked with Blizzard to do BlizzCon at the Anaheim Convention Center. So there was 7 stages there, all broadcasting live esports. So we partnered with EVS and BlizzCon. So they had all these stages. They had all the camera feeds that were live stage feeds of the gamers playing. Then they had the video game feeds coming in. That's all getting captured in EVS and then going out to live broadcast. So they had a all access website that you could go to at Blizzard's website where you could watch the different games and competitions. On the back end of that, all those feeds were then landing on an OpenDrive system where there was a post hub in the back of BlizzCon at the Anaheim Convention Center with 10 editors editing on Adobe Premiere with live growing files to push that stuff out to all these media content streams that we talked about earlier.
And they're doing it again for 2019.
Yep.
So yeah, it worked so well last year.
So this is
Some of it's instantaneous.
some of it's instantaneous.
Yeah, it's instantaneous. It has to be because there are
Yeah.
people watching this,
So
and they
not
do a
only-
lot of recutting.
Yeah, so they're doing it like multiple times per day. They're pushing it out. I don't know the exact, time turnaround, but it's within the same day, sometimes within the same hour based on the necessity of getting that content out. So not only is it the camera feeds coming from the stages, they also had guys running around with handheld cams with CF cards that are then ingesting that content. So then they have like all the cosplayers and the live fan reactions and all that kind of stuff that's separate from the broadcast feed that they're then able to interject and then publish.
Brian, how much time should we do? Make sure there's some time for Q&A if anyone has anything specific. I think we have a question over here. No worries. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so this one's for Dave Henley. Hi. Going back to AI for a second, I know there was this thing, news story quite a while ago about deep fakes and
Sure.
ethical considerations aside, I see that it might have some practical applications when cutting interviews. I know you have the morph cut, which is
Yep.
okay when it works.
Yep. Agreed.
But if you have these long form interviews where a person is doing ums and ers and filler words all the time, or if you want to change a word where their head is moving, do you see any kind of integration path for Adobe
Yes.
using that technology?
Yeah. So AI is going to be a part of all that. I will say just on the ethical side, because I do work very closely with CNN and very closely with Fox News in New York. So I kind of get, a deluge with all of these different concerns. I actually went in and showed these guys a lot of different things. For one, about the power of what we can do in After Effects with content aware fill. For one, I think news can use it up to a point to where we're getting rid of someone annoying over here, or we're getting rid of something that's distracting, that isn't taking away from the story. That's going to be up to a Fox edit or a CNN editor, however they want to do that. But at the same time, you want to be able to know that that's been done. And I have talked to a lot of our lead engineers that are behind the tech, and they say it's not hard to tell at all how, what's been done. Now, to the visual eye, that's a whole nother thing. But to forensics artists, we have a guy, John Penn, that works at Adobe that I work very closely with. He's the lead forensics guy. They're all behind that. So there's, when it becomes a point to where you need to figure that out, there are ways to do that. So that's the best I think we can do. But I do think this ability to be able to change, lip syncs and how faces move with what you see in the data. I think that's all going to be a part of it because we need that, believe it or not, for ADR, additional dialogue replacement. And we're trying to do the PG version of Deadpool and be able to have the lips do the right thing. So there's going to be great things for what we can do versus others, but all of that. And I think just like when Google had their messaging up here, Adobe's very similar in the way we try to conduct our business and write the software and things we think about. So we're all over that. So
Thank you. And one last thing, X-Rite color checker passport, please include that in your next upgrade.
Oh, so very good one. Do me a favor, you saw under the feedback, put it up there, check it first, start getting some votes, and then put it up on Facebook and say, please vote. Or whatever, Google Hangouts, wherever you are, just to get people to vote on that, because that's what gets attention. But I think that is a good one.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Who raised their hand?
Go for it. The mic's
Okay.
there.
Hi. My question is for David at Adobe. Just a simple question. Regarding eGPU that you were talking about earlier, do
Yeah.
you see a future where you are possibly including support for SLI or Crossfire support with AMD and NVIDIA cards for eGPU?
Not that I've seen so far. We've done testing with that. So for what this technology is that he's talking about, you have two graphics cards in there. There's a bridge connector that will come over to the top to do that. We've done testing and we really didn't see a whole lot of benefit out of that. And you have to get into driver wars and all that. But I will tell you what we are absolutely working on right now. I was in the labs this week. There's a ton of performance stuff coming out. We've been working really closely with Apple, as I said before, and Microsoft on some of the latest stuff. You'll notice we killed all support for Windows except for Windows 10. It's like if you're not running Windows 10, it's just like what we were talking about. You got to get with the new technology. We're highly recommending, Mac OS 10.14. If you're on the Mac, we do support 10.13. We don't support 10.12 anymore on the newer software because we're just like, if you need to get with speed and performance to take advantage of these, then you need to be on the newer OSs because it's up to those OS manufacturers to give us those deep level calls to get to Apple Metal or whatever, or Vulkan on the Windows, whatever the technologies are. So we're all about maximizing GPU, however we get there. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Is there another question back there?
All good? Gabe's got a question.
Go ahead, Gabe.
I've been to a couple of these in the past, and I think this is one of the best yet in terms of like representation from across the industry, and of course the moderation from Ray. I would just like to hear if you were to come back to one of these or something where can we go with these to achieve what we need to collaborate across the industry. What would you like to see? How would you like to see this sort of program build in the future? Does that make sense?
Like other types of vendors they might want to see or other topics?
Yeah, or size and scope, subject matter. Right now is post-production heavy. So yeah. Silicon
maybe
Valley.
social video, less social, different types of video. Maybe it's all about how do I create more social video.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of questions on that, by the way. So yeah, but if you guys have answers for Gabe's question, or is that for us?
I think it's for you guys. Are there other sort of meetups like this happening across Silicon Valley right now?
You guys? Not that I've seen. So I think each major city that I go to has a similar group. Washington, D.C. has the District Digital Creative Group, which is a big production group. So each of those guys have them. And the topics are really just driven by what these guys want to see, what they're hearing. I do see social video, this idea of being able to run Premiere on your iPhone or your Android phone. And whatever I create here, because the best editor is the one you have in your pocket. But the problem is, as corny as that is, if I can't get it to, my editor of choice, so for me, obviously Premiere, and I get 100% of what I just did on the phone, and I need to get it into Premiere to finish it. Now I can finish and start over here, but what if I need to come over here? Then it's kind of a waste of time. So I hear a lot of that. So those are the types of sessions we've been holding at some other ones, is mainly on social.
So I think that there's a lot of siloing of ideas. So you'll see long form theatrical guys, you'll see short form guys, you'll see production guys, you'll see post guys, broadcast guys, all meeting together to kind of talk about their things. And I think that the landscape is collapsing. I think that you're seeing much tighter integration from previs to post to distribution. That's really coming together a lot. So I'd like to see more, a crossing of those different silos, because it's going to happen anyway. And the sooner we get ahead of that and kind of bring those groups together, and then the innovation occurs where we're then seeing things. OpenDrives came from a strong post background, and now that we're involved more in broadcast, it's brought a lot of things oh wow, here's some neat new ideas and looking at the problem set in a different way. So I think that we can all value from bridging those gaps more.
I'd also throw it back out to you guys just to add this. Maybe these guys can chime in too. Other user groups around, or I call them professional associations, not really user groups, but the associations that are out there like this one. It's always great to hear, okay, Gabe, what are you using for shared storage? You come up and give a presentation to the group about maybe it's Google or maybe it's whatever production company you work for. How do you make this thing work? How do you do these things? So having user to user, present that back. So show us something you did in After Effects. Oh, you did this motion graphics template for this thing that you've done, or you've got this particular multicam edit in Avid or Final Cut, whatever it is, share that with the group. And then therefore now they know you're an expert on that, which is great. I think it makes the group tighter. So I would just say what's common for me when I go to these groups is someone from the audience is presenting something that they've done. They bring up their laptop and they're talking about whatever the topic is. So that's always a good one. So. Okay, you guys?
I mean, for me, it would be just the crossing of the silos thing. I used to actually teach at a film school. I taught at New York Film Academy for a little while. And so going through that process, you had to teach, you had to teach kids and adults alike the entire process from start to finish. And what they learned while doing all of those different positions, learning about cinematography, learning about basic directing, learning about, blocking, doing all of these things, and then going into post, going into edits, you learn more about the craft and the art as a whole. And so being able to bring people out of their own areas and being able to show them the experience and give them the experience of the rest of the industry and the rest of the art form, I think is really that sort of cross-pollination of ideas is really what's going to move people forward in their craft and their abilities.
Yeah, I think the cross-pollination, I think that's it's a fantastic thing. So I come from a place originally where you need to basically do anything. One day you might be actually mixing audio for a live show. The next day you might be operating a generator on a shoot for a commercial or whatever, right? And it's just what you did. I moved to America, and then it's like, no, you do this one thing, and that's your thing, right? But that is changing. It is changing partly because we're doing so much more content. There is so much more production happening for all of the obvious reasons that we all know, or the Netflixes of the world, and the ability that people that are doing esports now, they can just stream it to Twitch or YouTube or whatever it is, and they have a worldwide audience, and they may have commentators in as many languages as women's diving at the Olympics has. I don't know. You see these things. You go to an esports tournament right now, and there are 20 languages happening that are being delivered.
And we need AI so everybody can read those different languages, so
Yeah, and that's happening. On Broadway, for example. So the captioning, if you can't hear really well and you want to use captioning, there are services now where you actually stream the microphone, the ambient microphone from the auditorium. You stream it to a server somewhere. And on your phone, you actually see the script being read for you, and it's being paced by AI that's listening to the feed from the microphone in the actual theater. So all of these things are happening. But back to the point about cross-pollinating is that because there's so much more production, there's not necessarily more money. We're all doing kind of more things, right? We need more skills. So I think it's very powerful for all of us to understand what's happening around us and then be able to do all of these little things. I mean, it's not uncommon that you see 2-3 guys and they're doing a whole show, something that back in the day may have taken a whole truck of things.
Just want to throw out that Google has live captioning in Google Slides. Just a little promo here.
And by the way, I use Google Translate whenever I'm in a foreign country ordering off my menu or trying to find my way around the city. That live AR stuff is amazing.
I found out about the event tonight through my association with SVG, and we're big sponsors of the organization, and the amount of attention they bring to what we do and how we do it is amazing. I have never been a part of an organization like this that promotes itself so well. They'll get you in the press, they'll get you an article, an interview, anything you want to promote. I've taken advantage to promote myself sometimes, but they're very generous with their time. And as long as you have something to convey and share with them, they're usually open to ideas. And teaming up the SVVP with SVG was a great idea, I think, for both people.
I would
We
agree.
want to start the Silicon Beach video producers in LA modeled on this, because I really think this is a great idea.
Awesome. Well, I think we're running pretty long, so we probably should wind it down. I heard that maybe someone has a flight to catch. That should probably, should probably start thinking about it.